I did not know that there were enlisted entertainers
That
in
is
World.
interesting.
And she said, "Oh yes, MOS 442, Military Occupation Specialty 442. They did Jeep shows, what were called Jeep shows, and Jeep shows were invented in World War II for combat infantry in places where the USO and the Red Cross could not go, essentially at the front."
Wow.
And she said, then she went on and said, and by the way, my father was in Mickey Rooney's squad.
This interview episode is brought to you by Tyree Off-Road. Lights for people that need to get shit done. Visit tyreoffroad.com right now. That's TYRI offroad.com. Audio boys and girls, it's time for another Jeep Talk Show interview. And today we're going to be talking with Robert O'Connor. He is the author of an extraordinary new World War II novel, Jeep Show. A trooper at the Battle of the Bulge. His previous book was the nonfiction, oh my goodness, what is that? Gumptionade? Gumptionade, okay. And of course, I immediately think of Forrest Gump. And then they had the Vietnam scene for Forrest Gump. So that was like a, not PTSD, but that was a flashback. A booster for your self-improvement plan. Two radically different books, both about morale. As a young man, Robert was Phi Beta Kappa at the Kenyon College, marketing executive at Procter and Gamble. Oh, Procter and Gamble. Is that cereal?
That is soap.
Soap. Well, it's something you need to go with the cereal because somebody's going to make a mess. Then co-owner of an advertising agency. By his own account, he took a hard fail. Really? A hard fail? What happened?
Hard fall. When life kind of hit me in the face with a 2x4, and I went through a month of feeling pretty bad and started writing that first book as kind of just a way to deal with it. And after about 30 days, I woke up and felt better, and I just kept writing.
Did the job screw you over? Because that's kind of what it sounds like happened.
It was divorce. It was death of parents. It was,
oh my goodness,
job-related legal stuff. It was kind of a bunch of different things that hit me. All at once over a year or two. And
you were ambushed by life. It sounds like.
Yeah, probably no worse than most people, but for a month.
Oh, screw those people! We're talking about you.
Right? Yeah, it sucked. You're right. You're right, Tony.
I mean, don't let me convince you otherwise. It's just like I mean it's really bad. Wendy, one of my co-hosts, she had a longtime friend and somebody that she worked with, training people off road up in Gold Mountain in California. And Don Alexander, a very well-known individual in the off-road community, he suffered a stroke and fell and was hospitalized for a couple of weeks and passed away. And that was devastating. And then her husband went in to get an operation to get some potential blockage in his the arteries in his neck, and something got loose. And he had a minor stroke. Fortunately, he hadn't gone home yet, so they were able to get to it. But still, it's very traumatic. And then here recently, her father was taking care of Bill because Bill has a problem with communication still, her husband, and her dad passed away.
Yeah.
Stroke related.
Yes.
And things add up, and there's no rhyme or reason between these things. It wasn't like they were all riding together and everybody fell out of the Jeep and stuff.
Right,
it's just, it's something that makes sense, and it's nothing you anticipate. So, no, it's tough. Life is tough, and how you handle it is how what makes you the individual that you are, and life that had happened to that point gets you prepared for the handling stuff like that. So I'm glad you made it. That's really rough.
Well, and it gets back to a fundamental point I have about living, which is try to be kind to people, even if they're acting weird or unpleasant, because you never know what they might be going through. And you understand that, especially after you've been through the kind of things you're talking about, or the kinds of things that I was talking about.
Yeah, I've kind of learned that. I live here in Southeast Texas, and a lot of my driving to and from work included I-10 from one time or another, but a lot of time it was on I-10. And there would always be somebody that was in a hurry, and they were weaving in and out of traffic. And I am, sadly, at least I was, the type of person that I'm going to chase your ass down and slow you down. Because I'm not a police officer, but damn it, there's not a police officer here. I'm going to take care of it now. And then I thought about it and went, that could be a parent rushing, a man even rushing to the hospital or the school where his child was injured. It's a guy driving a BMW, so no, it's just an asshole. But I'm just gonna assume that it's somebody, and I don't need to impede them. I mean, they shouldn't be driving like that. But where would I be if my child was injured or upset? Or it didn't have to be an injury; it just could be in need or getting to your wife. So I just left it alone. Let the police handle it. They didn't hit me. Yeah,
empathy. Yeah.
So. So, and we all should do that. I agree. And it may be very clear, and you may be right in your assumption, but give them the benefit of the doubt. All right. So, Jim, you've written a book, and you can everybody here that's listening to this interview can go to jeepshowbook.com and follow along while we're talking about all this in our interview. Okay, so I skipped through some of the intro here because we got to talking. I'm not going to go back.
Worries.
Yeah, I'm not going to go back. We're just going to talk about it. So tell us. There's lots of good stuff here in the intro. Give me the intro bit that we didn't go through. I mean, what got you to the book? What got you to where you are?
I was. As you mentioned, I wrote a book a while ago, a nonfiction, and I was going to write another nonfiction book about a circus and a certain circus promoter. And I ended up getting in touch. He's long gone. I got in touch with his daughter in Dallas, and we talked, and she said, yes, he was a circus promoter after the war, and he did this and he did that. But did you know that during the war, he was an enlisted entertainer in the Army in the European Theater of Operations? And I said, I did not know that there were enlisted entertainers.
That is interesting.
And she said, oh, yes, MOS 442, Military Occupation Specialty 442. They did Jeep shows, what were called Jeep shows, and Jeep shows were invented in World War II for combat infantry in places where the USO and the Red Cross could not go, essentially at the front.
Wow.
And she said, then she went on and said, and by the way, my father was in Mickey Rooney's squad and did Jeep shows with Mickey Rooney. Now, your older listeners will know, but perhaps your younger listeners will not. Mickey Rooney was the #1 worldwide box office star in 1939 and 1940, a gigantic figure in Hollywood, a genius, a man with incredible strengths and incredible weaknesses to accompany him. Yeah. His partying was completely out of control. So she talked more about this. I did some research, and I decided that I would write about these enlisted entertainers, and one in particular, one character inspired by her father. It's fiction, it's not a biography, but certainly inspired by her father's experience. And by the way, she told me, my father's older sister, my Aunt Mabel, saved every letter he wrote home from training camp and from the European Theater of Operations. And I was like, primary sources. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I said, can I come down to Dallas and look at them? I'll wear, cotton archival gloves. I'll be very careful. And she said, oh, don't worry. My sister published them in a book on Amazon. So I bought the book, and there I have, 100 some odd letters, some of which were uncensored, describing, what his life was like as a entertainment soldier in World War II in Europe. And Then in the endless internet, I found the Army's manual from 1944 for the morale, what was called the Morale Corps. So I could read all about the, what is now almost semi-humorous, the instructions and the equipment and that the Army wrote a manual for just about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I had those primary sources, and I decided to make it fiction because I wanted to write about the Battle of the Bulge, and I wanted this main character to be involved in the Battle of the Bulge, uh, which was the largest battle ever fought by the U.S. Army. So I made it fiction, and that is Jeep Show, a trooper at the Battle of the Bulge. And trooper, as you can see, is spelled Trouper, as in traveling entertainer, rather
Right.
than, space trooper soldier. So that's the genesis. That's the genesis of the book. And by the way, I've talked to several historians who specialize in World War II, and I've talked to many, many World War II buffs. None of them have ever heard about enlisted entertainers.
I'm so glad, because I certainly haven't. It's really, really very interesting. And talking about Mickey Rooney, so I lived in a time where there were 4 TV channels in the Houston area.
Of course.
And you watched, if you didn't want to read a book, which, oh my God, I'm horrible. I don't like reading books because I never can remember the names of the characters, because they're often strange names. And also too, once I get started on a book, I don't want to stop doing it. I don't even want to stop for eating and stuff. So,
right.
As a kid, especially at that time, it was whatever's on TV. And of course, Andy Hardy, a lot of the Mickey Rooney. Yeah. There was a Spencer Tracy movie. I can't remember where he played a reverend, and Mickey Rooney was in it. He was one of the troubled Boys Town. Oh, what a great movie!
Famous movie.
Yeah, what a great movie. So yeah, I know Mickey Rooney from a lot of things. In fact, I still use the phrase that nobody understands. I always say, "Hey, my dad's got a barn. Let's put on a show."
I get it. By the way, there is the Mickey Rooney and this real entertainment soldier actually did, as part of their act, a slow motion wrestling act, and it was lifted directly from Boys Town.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, yes.
So I can well imagine that as an entertainer on the front lines, you could really blame the low interest in maybe the joke or whatever. And well, these people are worried about dying, so we're having a hard time here entertaining. But I could also think of, and this is a wonderful idea that the Army had, actually taking the mind of this off the soldiers. But my gosh, it's just, you don't know when there might be a sniper.
Well, they were within artillery and sniper range. They were not, within hand grenade throwing range, but they were within artillery range, and that figured sometimes. What you found with the audience was the main thing, because they were experienced combat soldiers, they would always look around for cover. They would always know where they were going
absolutely.
To go if shit started to happen.
That's right.
And I mentioned that. In the book. But they very much appreciated these Jeep shows. By the way, the Jeep shows came about because a famous Broadway director, Joshua Logan, like most men, was in the Army, in the Morale Corps, and he realized that by November 1944, the American Army was on the German border. And they had great, and the frontline combat troops were fairly isolated. They had moved so fast. Mm-hmm. So he broke up these guys, these entertainers came over with this big Army show called Hip Hooray, and it had an Army band and all sorts of things. And they thought they were going to be playing this show in Paris, which would be a great life if you're in the Army. And Joshua Logan came up with the concept of Jeep shows and said, no, we're going to put 3 of you guys in a Jeep with a driver, and we're going to drive you to just behind the front lines, and these, because the combat infantry is not getting what all the rear echelon soldiers are getting: shows and good food and even the best uniforms. And I'm unaware of any, these enlisted men were all under orders, so it's not like they could say, "Oh, I don't think I want to do that." This is the Army. You have to do what you're told.
Right.
So, and by the way, here's some names besides Mickey Rooney, the most famous 442. There's also Mel Brooks.
Wow.
And the rest of these, Mickey Rooney was, of course, world famous. But in the rest of these names I'm going to give you were unknown, 19, 20-year-old GIs who just happened to have some show business experience. So Mel Brooks, Sammy Davis Jr., Red Skelton, a famous comedian. Some of your older listeners will know Burt Lancaster, Dick Van Dyke, Don Knotts, and several others.
It's amazing. All of those people, just amazing individuals. And a couple of them are still alive. It's just amazing.
We are losing our veterans. We're down to the ones that have great longevity. But yes, I think Dick Van Dyke, for example, is still around and making noise. Yeah. So it was, and by the way, I have a theory which I'm not going to research because I do not want it to be disproven.
Oh, I love that.
But, Sammy Davis Jr. was a black man. Well, the Army was segregated in World War II. Yes, there were black units, but there were no mixed units. Well, guess what? Sammy Davis Jr. was a black man, and he was in the Morale Corps, and that made it a mixed unit. So
interesting.
This is my theory that I don't want it disproven, but I say Sammy Davis Jr. desegregated the U.S. Army.
Absolutely. Well, it's like we don't care who's in this group. We need to entertain our troops.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that even back then, it probably wasn't a popular position, but even back then, I'm sure there were people in the Army that didn't agree with the segregation thing. Especially when you're trying to make sure you win a war. Don't be so petty that the black people are trying to protect their homeland as well.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. In fact, that's a very interesting subject. General Marshall, the superb, basically highest level general, said you can to Roosevelt, you can ask the Army to win a war, or you can ask an army to fight the civil rights battle, but we cannot do both at the same time.
Right.
And I guess he was, it was a different attitudes back then, and so anyway.
So
Sammy Davis.
Yeah. Let me just point this out. So you're a German, maybe a German soldier or just a person living in Germany. The U.S. troops are nearing or in your country, and they hear that the U.S. troops are putting on a show. It's like, wait a minute, these people are coming to our houses. They're gonna take care of the German army, which I'm sure some of the Germans were fine with that.
Oh yes, by then, yes.
And it's like, well, these people must really be worried about taking us over because they're taking time to have some nice food and a show. So that would be a low morale thing for the country that you're invading.
Yes, the Germans were, they were. In the war, they were constantly faced with the abundance of the American army. The American economy produced more war material by 1943, end of 1943, than all the other belligerent nations combined. This show is about Jeeps. The American economy produced 650,000 Jeeps in World War II, gave about 250,000 of them to the Brits and the Russians, and still had plenty. So the Germans were constantly depressed by the amount of American equipment, that they had to face. And
we cheated because we would bomb their factories and make it even more difficult.
we tried to, yes. It mattered a lot that our factories had the Atlantic Ocean between us
Yeah.
us and Germany.
Well, and that kind of dictated the size of the Jeep. It's because we had to get those vehicles from the United States across the Atlantic and the Pacific as well, because they weren't just used in the European theater. So that had a lot to do with how the size of the Jeep, and how the weight. And I know it was well overweight for what the Army wanted. I do remember that.
Well, let me give you quickly what I know about, the weight and the size. After World War One, as things started to heat up in Europe in the late 30s, the Army Quartermaster Corps was looking for something to replace the horse, and even for carrying messages, for pulling wagons, replace the horse, and then replace the motorcycle for message carrying and all that. Motorcycles were too noisy and too unstable. So they they found a company called the Bantam Car Company.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bantam Car Company, remember before there were many, many automakers back in the day, many, dozens.
All right.
And the Bantam Car Company made something called an American Bantam. And basically it was a version of a British mini car, just a small car. So the Quartermaster Corps had asked Bantam to make 70 prototypes of what became the Jeep. And it was not called the Jeep then. So Bantam made them. They basically, it was had a quarter ton. It was called a quarter ton truck because it had a capacity of a quarter ton, and then it weighed itself about a ton. So very light. 4x4 capabilities, of course. It's a Jeep, 2.2 liter engine, Go Devil, 60 horsepower, which sounds pitiful,
mm-hmm.
but for when your vehicle is 2,200 pounds and it's meant to be going in low gear most of the time,
right.
It actually is plenty of horsepower. So the Army liked these prototypes, but they didn't like the fact that Bantam Car Company had about 500 employees and was kind of shaky on finances. So they involved two other companies, Willys Overland, and then that small company called the Ford Motor Company.
Mm-hmm.
They involved them in the bidding and basically ended up choosing Willys and Willys Overland design, and then split the production between Willys and Ford Motor Company because Ford could do it. Ford
right.
could handle it. So it came about, the Jeep was to be, a scout car, mostly replacement for the horse or the motorcycle. And I know your listeners are interested in modifications. Well, the Jeep was modified, as it got into battle, it was modified dozens and dozens of times, sometimes in the field, with a welding torch,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes, back in Detroit. But, for example, one of the first things they put on in the field was a wire cutter, a steel beam going vertically in front, on the front fender, because there was fear. I don't know how real it was. There was fear that the Germans, as they got closer to Germany, would be
put up wires to decapitate
wires
or
about head height. Yeah, about head height. It was probably more likely that sagging telephone wires put up by the Signal Corps were also a danger.
Hey, it doesn't matter. Anything that's going to catch your neck or face. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And it's dangerous enough already without that.
There's no roll bar because you can't have the weight. And absolutely. I'm sure there was lots of things that were done to those Jeeps.
In fact, Patton said that he said the Jeep was one of the most dangerous weapons the Germans had because of how badly the troops drove it. I'm sure there were.
All those kids out there, and they're worried about dying anyway. Well, screw it. Let's have some fun in this thing. Right. So let me ask you real quick. I don't know if you have the answer to this or not, but four-wheel drive must have been something unusual for that period of time. I mean, there was tractors and things that were used on the farm, but those certainly weren't four-wheel drive. They just had two massive rear wheels that would give you the traction. So this would have really been the first time that a lot of people got to drive a 4x4.
I'm going to just have to speculate and say you're right. The probably the and I don't know what the initial four-wheel drive would have been, other than possibly customized for logging companies, and
Right.
take a Ford truck and customize it for mining or logging. But yes, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like if the first time you've been in a four-wheel drive off-road, and you go through things or go up things, and you go, "Wow, this is amazing."
Yeah.
But you get some sense of that now through YouTube and things. But to put some 20-year-old or 18-year-old in a vehicle with four-wheel drive and just have it go anywhere, it had to have been an amazing thing. And I can see how the soldiers would have fallen in love with the Jeeps.
Yes, they absolutely did. And that sort of started the legend. Interestingly, the American car culture was already in full force by then. So most of these soldiers, if not all of them, knew how to drive. A problem the Germans had when they captured American Jeeps or American trucks was most German soldiers had never driven.
Interesting.
And in fact, the Germans throughout World War II relied as heavily on horses as they did on powered vehicles to move things, pull things, and all that. So the American car culture, which created the Jeep, was unique and was ended up being a huge advantage for the Allies. For one thing, the Americans, because of the automobile and the of course the Ford Model T was the first big one, but which really took off in the 1920s. The automobile market went from kind of a niche thing for wealthy people in 1919, and by 1929 there were millions of Ford Model Ts and other cars on the road. That let the Americans pioneer mass production techniques.
Yep.
And so one of the things you saw with World War II vehicles and other and planes and ships was came right out of mass production, which is they were very standardized and fairly simple. So it was very simple to fix a Jeep in the field. The parts were standardized, and the same thing with boats and ships and planes. And so the Americans had learned this mass production process is better than any other country in the world because of the automobile. And then when it came time to manufacture war material, we were in a depression. So, half the blue collar workers were out of work and half the factories were empty. So it was I won't say easy, because it wasn't easy, but it was relatively easy to start up the production of war materials, including Jeeps, because there were a lot of people out of work and a lot of industrial capacity.
Yeah, there's no hemming and hawing. It's like, we're going to do this. You want a job? And they're already working before you can finish the sentence. Yeah.
Exactly.
So the timing of it was very good.
Yeah.
It strikes me that World War II, I don't know that World War I was so much like this, but World War II was very much a technology war. Germany only got as far as they got because their technology was just amazing. They're very innovative in doing things. And and I never thought about and it's more so than just the raw materials. I mean, obviously the United States had more raw materials at their fingertips than what the Germans did, being in a small country. But it was also the technology that was the technology of the Jeep, the four-wheel drive, the ability to make a bunch of those things very quickly. Absolutely. And that also spilled over into planes and tanks and everything else.
The Sherman tank was outgunned and outmaneuvered by the German tanks, but was, available in so much higher numbers, even though they were shipped, across an ocean, and they were also much more reliable. The Germans, they did have incredible technology, but they tended to make things standalone. So the German Tiger tank, which had a fearsome reputation, did not fit, had its own set of parts, had its own mechanical needs, and was not standardized. And
oh my God, that's horrible. I mean, because you got people out there trying to repair the damn thing.
Right. And the Japanese Zero, which was a very effective plane at the beginning of the war, was the same thing. They were almost made in an artisanal way. It
Right.
wasn't mass production. It was sort of artisans
Not quite handmade, but the next
Oh, yeah,
level.
but almost
Yeah.
hand finished at least. Whereas
I did
in
not
America,
know that. Those were amazing pieces of technology.
yeah,
And I mean, I'm not saying people can't make amazing things, but in a war of attrition, which
right.
all wars are going to be, I mean, unless you're making a one-punch wonder, you have to be able to have a bunch of these things for people to use.
And the Germans did waste because Hitler was crazy. The Germans did waste a lot of time and energy on super weapons that were not, like the buzz bomb, and they actually, as you know, invented the first jet. But they couldn't make
amazing technology for the time.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Meanwhile, we're stamping out 20 planes to their one, day, hour in, hour out. So yes, the mass production, good enough philosophy and mass production, prevailed.
Yeah, it's that's just really interesting. And I mean, I knew the common saying is, your Honda's nice, but did it win a war? And the Jeep was very important in getting troops to where they needed to be and getting there quickly. So, the Jeeps have a fantastic history, and now we get them, use them to get groceries, go to Easter Jeep Safari, drive around on sandpaper covered rocks, and
yeah. By the way, after the war, you could buy a surplus. There were many, as if we made 650,000. There were many surplus Jeeps after the war, and you could buy them for $750, which was probably about 10,000, $8 or $9,000 back then. I also want to tell your listeners, and again, this shows the difference between the American economy and our enemies in World War II. They're not our enemies now, but the German equivalent was called the Kubelwagen to the Jeep. It was smaller, lighter, pretty good scout car. They made all of 50,000.
Oh my goodness.
That's all they made. Yeah, it was a rare sight, but here the Japanese equivalent was called the Kurgan Type 95, at least in English. They made 5,000 of them. Meanwhile, the American, we made 650,000 Jeeps. So, and the Jeep was better than those two for its job as well. But again, it just symbolizes the strength of the American economy when, because of government spending, war spending, we got it going on full production.
So I don't know if the German vehicle you're talking about, you remember the VW thing?
Oh yes,
yeah. I mean,
most dangerous car,
but it was cool. Yeah, it was cool looking.
Very cool.
And but that was something directly from World War II, wasn't it?
Yeah. That has a Volkswagen chassis, and this Kubelwagen had a original sort of what became the Volkswagen chassis. So yeah, that was Frederick Porsche. He gave us the Kubelwagen, and he gave us the VW Bug, and yes, the VW
I don't think there were any cool vehicles from World War II that were cooler than the Jeep. The Jeep just had this very utilitarian, small look to it, get you around, and everything else was kind of fancy. The Germans' vehicles were kind of fancy. It's like
too fancy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
It's like they missed the whole idea behind war.
Right. Well, they had a different tradition, and the Jeep, not only, some of the things it did, it was invented as a scout car, essentially, for intelligence and going over hills and through streams and valleys, as you and your friends do now with your Jeeps. But it also, you could mount a machine gun on it, and usually it was a 30 cal, but sometimes a 50 cal probably made the thing drive backwards.
I was just going to say, because I always thought it was a 50. Yeah, 30 makes more sense, but yeah
50 is pretty heavy for a 1 ton truck. There was also, they adapted it as an ambulance, put stretchers on the front, and it could also tow some of the lighter artillery. and
I think I've seen that, where the animated GIF where the Jeep is jumping and then the artillery behind it is jumping behind the Jeep, because it's being pulled. Yeah, there was. I mean, I know that war is dangerous, but man, there was some dangerous stuff with those Jeeps that they did.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was highly adaptable. We are a resourceful people, and we were, our young soldiers and their officers were resourceful, and they took that Jeep platform and did all sorts of practical stuff to it in theater to make it do many jobs.
And you got to figure that because of that, and because of that interaction, I never even thought about the soldiers making modifications to the Jeep, which makes perfect sense. Whenever the war was over and now there was all these Jeeps, it makes perfect sense why farm instruments were now adapted to the Jeep, because now you've got this relatively inexpensive go anywhere vehicle. Let's hang some shit off of it and make it do work. Yeah.
Lightweight, low geared, built like a mule. That's what,
and the sales was already there, because all these people that were using it, and probably in some cases saved their lives, and certainly
they were very familiar with it.
Yeah,
it did. And the Jeep name, this vehicle was not called a Jeep when it appeared.
Right.
It was really, the Army just called it a quarter-ton truck, and a quarter-ton is
no imagination.
Is how much it can carry, and there's many origin myths and stories about the Jeep name, but essentially the one that makes the most sense to me is during the war, companies that were involved with war production were making tons of money. And they didn't need to advertise, their consumer products, so they would advertise their contribution to the war effort.
Right, that makes sense.
To burnish their name and keep their name in front of people, because after the war,
early virtual signaling, I think is what they would call that.
Big time, and solid marketing, because
absolutely
know your name, because the war is going to end at some point, and so. Willys Overland, the partner with Ford in producing them, started advertising their Jeep, which was a name they borrowed from other, out of the other Army slang and all that. And that's essentially what established this vehicle, the quarter-ton truck, as the iconic Jeep. And, as I think about it, as I prepared to talk with you, Tony, it made sense to me that there were two, in all of the 20th century, there were two iconic vehicles in the world. One was the Ford Model T, which, basically established the car industry in America and thus in the world. And the second was the Jeep, because it was not only so iconic, it was emblematic of what won the war for the Allies, which was American production, not solely, there was, but American production. And then the American adaptation of this, vehicle created for the war, at first for farming and logging and camping. And then, in the 50s, it started to catch on, as a consumer vehicle choice. So those two, the role of the Jeep in the 20th century, I think, is well worth investigating, because of what it says about America and what it says about the world.
I'll just mention this. I don't want to get political, but we're very divided in the country as far as politics go. And I think one of the reasons why we won the war and why we were able to be so innovative and do so many things is because we are a nation of more than one race of people. I mean, and multiple people from multiple countries that are even considered white. So you have different ways of thinking. Your culture that you came from, or your parents' culture, was different. So you have different ways of thinking. I like the idea of, even if I disagree with a person's position, it's a good opportunity to learn something when you talk to somebody that thinks a different way than you do. Just because they don't parrot you exactly doesn't mean they're wrong. So this is why this is this country of strength. So I love it when we have people that join the country. They either come here or especially when they become citizens. Anytime I see a post on social media where they're saying, "Hey, I've become a U.S. citizen," I always say, "Welcome to the club," because that's really what we got here is a very successful club.
America was all in during World War II, and what I realized, it's very interesting. The American Army, speaking of the melting pot and different perspectives, the American Army was larger than the Navy and the Marines and the Army Air Force combined. So unlike those three services, the Army had to rely on the draft. So the Army was an excellent representation of America as a whole. So they had, they drafted PhDs, they drafted boys and men with a third grade education. They drafted many soldiers that they had to teach English to in basic training so they could understand their orders. And these soldiers, especially the Italian and German speakers, of which there were thousands, were very valuable in the European theater. We drafted Japanese Americans, but for whatever reason sent them to Europe. So the ones that spoke Japanese at home, couldn't help us. That was probably a racially motivated, stupid mistake. But the Army was so large that it had to represent America as a whole. And one of the things that I really came to understand is these were citizen soldiers. Most of them, they got drafted or they joined because they were patriotic and they also, knew they would be drafted. But they were citizens. They voted while they were in the Army. Their parents wrote letters of complaint to their congressmen about things. And these citizen soldiers, were pretty skeptical of most of their officers. There were a few officers they really respected, but in general, they were skeptical of their officers, as any American is.
Sure.
And they were very skeptical with what they called chicken shit, which was Army hierarchy bullshit. You're gonna salute, and you cannot salute with a cigarette in your hand. And by the way, go paint the colonel's flagstones, in front of his house. Very skeptical of that. But what I found is they, for the most part, and my dad certainly did, they look back on their service in the Army as kind of the most ennobling event of their lives. And, we're very proud of their service, even though while they were doing it, they weren't all that excited about it.
No. But a discipline maker, though, it makes you grateful for what you have.
Absolutely. And what they were really, they weren't my impression is, they understood the big ideas. Germany was a totalitarian evil state. Japan was a totalitarian evil state. We were fighting for freedom in the world. But it turned out what they really said they fought for was their buddies. The guys in their squad, the guys in their platoon, that's what they really felt they were fighting for. So very, very different than, our current society where our veterans, and I'm, of active duty and veterans, I'm just so full of respect for them.
I may too as well.
But we're not all, the society is not all in. We've parceled off the war fighting to that group, and the rest of us are not all in. Yes, and it's a real shame. I think it's a real shame, and I think we need, as a society, need to pay much more attention to what we're asking of our active duty military and what we have asked of our veterans.
Yeah, even if they're not in direct harm's way, it's still a lifestyle that they don't get the luxury of just doing what they want to do and working whatever job they want to work, and so on and so forth. I did want to make one correction, though. You talked about some of the Army people with third grade educations. I think those were all Marines, so they weren't in Army.
You're in trouble, mister. You are in trouble.
The Marines are used to it. I mean, we have a listener that goes by Crayon Eater, so He knows how the Marines are.
Okay, I did not, to all my friends who are Marine Corps veterans, I did not say that. I don't approve of that.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Thank you.
Come at me. I don't care. You guys come on. It's fine. They know. We have Army folks, we have Air Force folks, and we have Marines, all part of the Jeep Talk Show. And boy, we have a roundtable that we do every Wednesday is a roundtable episode. And whenever they get on there and they start talking about military, it gets ugly quick.
Yes, and they have their own shared language that the rest of us have to have translated sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Robert, really interesting stuff. I know we've just scratched the surface here of this information. You're a wealth of knowledge. Remind everybody about the book, jeepshowbook.com. I didn't warn you, but I'm sure you're used to talking about social media. Where can people find you? The kids love the social media. Lots of pictures, not many words. Maybe not your audience for reading a book.
One last thing I want to mention related to veterans. I am donating $1 per copy sold to a veterans organization called Shields and Stripes, which provides mental health and other health support for veterans and first responders. And as you know, many first responders are also veterans. And I told them that I would give them all the profits from the sale of the book, but $1 per copy was way more money. So the book is available on Amazon. Just enter Jeep Show Book into Amazon. The website is xjtalk.com, and there's extra content there and a video. And then we're on Facebook and we're on Instagram, I believe. So we're out there. And just to say, Tony, it's really been a privilege to talk with you. This is a different discussion than I usually have about the book. But most interesting.
Well, I warned you before we started.
Yeah. Can't get ready for Tony, though. Get ready for Tony.
You never want to expect. So is there another book in you? You got another book coming out about Jeeps or World War II or Jeeps in World War II?
Once I get over the chaos of moving from Memphis, Tennessee to Minneapolis, Minnesota, I'm going to start on a sequel because I don't know what to do with my time other than research and write books. And I'm very interested in the GI Bill, which sent GIs to college and trade school after the war and basically changed the fabric of American society.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to put my main character, I'm going to send him to college, even though he's quite old for it, on the GI Bill and see what happens.
Very interesting. Oh, this is very fascinating. Oh, and is this book also available on Kindle?
This book is available Kindle ebook. It's available in an audio book for people that like to listen to books, and then it's available in print as well.
Perfect. So, audiobooks. Yes. There's a lot of our listeners love audiobooks.
I think that's right up your alley, Tony.
Yeah, exactly.
Get the audiobook and listen while you're, fixing the garage or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's just like podcasts. It's a really neat thing to do while you're driving back and forth to work. And if you work in Houston, you got lots of time on your hands in traffic.
My Lord.
Yeah.
Every time I drive into Houston, I feel like I'm driving into like the belly of the beast. It is just a different, the New York area compares, but it's incredible.
So it's funny, a coworker and I went to Boston for an IT, I don't know, what is it? Not conference, a thing where you get training. And I think that nobody wanted to drive in Boston. I said, I'll drive. And we had a couple of guys that were from Boston in the back seat, and they were going, "Holy crap, are you from here?" And I said, "No, I'm from Houston." Boy, you drive really good in Boston. It's like I just see targets to nearly avoid.
Right. Yeah, it's like going from the major leagues to AAA. Boston is, competitive, but Houston and New York are their own things.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for being with us today, and the honor is all here. We love having great guests, and you certainly have been one of those, and we'll have to have you back, whether you got a new book or not, because like I said, I'm sure we got lots more stuff to talk about again to continue this conversation. So jeepshowbook.com, just look that up on Amazon, buy that book, and let us know. Reach out to us on jeeptalkshow.com/contact and tell us what you thought about the book, and we'll talk about it right here on the show. Robert, thanks again so much, and have a great rest of your day. Oh, and good luck on the move. Real quick, what is it? You moving from Tennessee to Minnesota? Is that what you said?
Minneapolis,
and Minnesota.
Yes.
So what? You just not getting enough snow in Tennessee?
It's not cold enough in Memphis. I've got a grandson. We have a grandson and a daughter-in-law, and years were going by, and we thought and it seemed like a good idea at the time. I'm not so sure now.
I love snow. I've only seen snow 4 times in my life, being a Texan, native Texan, and my whole life in Southeast Texas. Snow is exciting. I love snow.
Well, when you see it 4 times a week, you might not,
I understand.
For 20 weeks. We'll see how we feel. We just got here. It's almost spring, and we'll see. I'll talk to you next January about our plan to move to Texas.
Very, very good. Robert, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. Pleasure was all mine.
Broadcasting since 2010.
You're my friend. You're my new friend.